If you've struggled with stress, balance, or burnout, and simply feel discouraged or even defeated, and if you're ready to move from force to flow and enjoy ultimate Zen success in your career, health, or relationships, then the Zen Success Show is for you. Your host, Carissa Sims, is an entrepreneur, corporate consultant, best-selling author, meditation teacher, and healer who has found her own Zen success. Here's your host, Carissa Sims.
Welcome to this week's episode of Zen Success. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. David Bernstein. Hi.
Hi, good
And
afternoon. Lovely to see you today.
yes, lovely to be with you again. This is the second time I've had Dr. Bernstein on my show. And the last time it was about his book, The Power of Five. And so I'm so thrilled to have you back today to educate my audience and just to share what you've been up to since then. So let me share a little bit about Dr. David Bernstein. He's an MD, highly respected, award-winning physician, board certified in both internal medicine and geriatrics in Clearwater, Florida. His 40 years of experience have provided him opportunities to observe and empathize with thousands of adults as they age. His insight and ability to monitor patient patterns and outcomes compelled him to share what he has learned with others. He has integrated his practical experience with up-to-date research to develop a strategy to enhance longevity and vitality. We all love that. A major focus is helping all adults improve their health span and remain healthy and active for as long as possible. It's so important with our aging population. Dr. Bernstein is an engaging and entertaining public speaker addressing various medical topics with his colleagues and the community at large, focusing on individuals and families facing the complex problems of aging, longevity, or the exciting phase of life, aging, remaining healthy and youthful. His latest book is called When It's Time to Move, Assessing the Why, Exploring the How. Welcome, Dr. Bernstein.
Thanks again. Great to be here.
Yeah, so happy. So what inspired you to write your latest book?
Great question. I love talking about it. So we live in South Florida or Central Florida. We live right on the water, and we've endured several hurricanes. So the summer of 2024, we prepared our home to go away for a month. And that entailed me finding and picking up 30, 50-pound sandbags at various times, putting them in the back of my car, taking them out of my car, putting them on a hand truck, bringing them to the backyard, putting them around the doors and sealing up the house, putting away furniture, etc. All the things we do. We live in a stilt home, so we're protecting the lower level of our home. And as we pulled out of the driveway, I said to my wife, "Oh, my elbows hurt." It was like tennis elbow or golfer's elbow. And I had no idea what caused it until about 100 miles into the trip. And I said to my wife, "It was the sandbags. My arms are killing me because of the sandbags. We have to move." And we talked about moving all the time, but we had the most beautiful sunsets over Tampa Bay. So
Yeah, being in the water, it's
it,
incredible.
it was difficult. And I recognized that there were 17 steps to get into our home. 17 steps carrying a suitcase up or down when we travel, runs from Costco, groceries. We were getting older. We knew it. It's my specialty. We could have known better, but we were loving it. And for a 62-day trip, 60 days, my wife and I talked about everything about moving, why we would move, the ins and outs. And she finally agreed by day 60. That's when we finally turned on our audiobook, which we intended to listen to for 30 hours of our trip. And then we got home. 2 weeks later, Hurricane Helene hit. And that took like what was a whisper into a shout about the need to move because we had a lot of cleanup. My wife and I worked as a team. She did the inside of the house, worked with contractors. I worked with the outside, getting the pool cleaned out, getting the pool cleaned up, the furniture reset in our yard. We had outside damage. We had damage to the wall in our garage. The hot tub was destroyed and moved, and there were arborists and cement people had to come in and pick up, and then there were trash pickups. It was a whole big deal, and it was traumatizing. And I reflected on that, and I reflected on the trip coming home from Wisconsin about how we would do our next steps.
Mm. Yes. And so, do you have anything more to add about these 62 days together and how they shaped your understanding of healthy aging and relocating?
Sure. Well, for the first part of the trip, going up north, we made several stops and visited family, and then spent a month in Wisconsin, not knowing that we were going to be set by a storm. On our way home, we stopped at friends' homes. We stopped in Cleveland and Vermont and Massachusetts, visited my brother on Long Island, a niece and our cousin in Maryland, and stayed about 4 days with friends in Chapel Hill. And it was social and it was fun. We reminisced about medical school and training and education and cousins and friends and golf and all those things that you would do with friends. And out of the corner of my eye, I focused a little bit on what their home lives were like. Was it safe? Were they in a good location? What was it all about? What kept them there? Because everybody loved where they lived. I know my friends in Cleveland were really a unique couple. I didn't know them as well as my wife did. And they had a beautiful small home, two-story, and an office was upstairs. They had a yard with vegetables and flowers that were growing. Each of them had contacts in their community and loved their friends. And it was really neat how they served and serviced one another. And so that I registered about those stairs. And then it was on to Vermont, where we stayed at a summer A-frame home and just hung out with friends. And we did something similar in Massachusetts and learned about, what property cost and what taxes were like. Long Island, New York, taxes were really high. Summers were nice, but winters in all of those places were kind of cold. And each of the families we visited had interaction with their children. They were either nearby or distant. So we kind of analyzed that. And let's see, my brother's daughter lived really nearby, and that was convenient and nice. And we got to Chapel Hill, and our friends there were lovely folks. They catered to our every whim. They were also catering to the whims of their two adult children, their spouses, and their grandkids. And I thought they were overwhelmed by the necessity for grandparenting. They also had a beautiful kitchen, but neither knew how to cook or use their kitchen.
Yeah.
Considering that my wife and she's a trained chef, it was really pretty interesting to go through all that, and that all registered with me, and I really didn't have an intention of writing anything more. But when the storm hit and we had to do all of that, I had to crunch all that data from our travel, from the need to move, and then we focused on things like what kind of community would we want? What's important to us that would make the best decision for us? And realizing, it's a personal decision, it's elective, and that it also has a medical component because there's a lot of stress involved in that. And one needs to make sure that they're settled in the right kind of community. So we met with some realtors, we looked around, we looked at a high-rise condo in Tampa Bay, right, looking out over the arena, but also looking out over a phosphate factory. and it was smaller, and it was not, the ceilings were not as high. So we factored all of that stuff and came to some conclusions.
So
And
are
that
you going
was,
to tell us where you're moving to? Or you already
yeah.
moved?
No, no, we moved. We in fact bought a house before we sold ours, but the timing was such that there was a very short gap. We found a place 6 miles from home
Oh,
and
okay.
35 feet above sea level in a very nice community where we're surrounded by adults, a few adults our age, but mostly the adults the ages of our kids. And these kids, these young adults have families with kids like our grandkids, and everybody has two dogs. And there's a one-way street in front of our house, so there's not a lot of traffic. I see UPS and Amazon trucks and Walmart trucks passing by, but not a lot of extra traffic. There's a lot of foot traffic. And I think the most important ingredient my wife and I decided on was that we did not want to leave our friends. It didn't make
Yes. So
sense for
that's
us to go to.
why only 6 miles instead of like 120 or 5,000.
I, I observed my parents moving at a little bit later age than we did, and I think they moved 6 miles, and none of their friends ever came to visit them. They moved into an independent living facility, and it was like puff, they evaporated. All those years of involvement in their community just went away. And we did not want that. We're close with our friends and our community, and we've both been involved in our synagogue and in other charitable organizations that we committed to, and we just didn't want to leave it.
Mm.
And we've made it so that our friends know that we're nearby. We haven't, it's only about 10 minutes longer for me to drive to have lunch with my friends and still go to the trainer at the same location. Another 7 or 8 minutes drive so that we assessed for our needs. We wanted to be close to the socialization part, which is what I talk about in my writing and what I've observed is one of the most important features of aging well and having a good health span.
Yes.
So,
And I love that you talk about community, and that was one of the driving factors of your move, moving so close, because there is some research in the blue zones talking about community and how that correlates to longevity, correct?
yes, it is. And it was a major influence on us. And I'm glad you mentioned the blue zones because I have something to show you. In
Okay.
1973, when I was in high school, um,
Ah, the year I was born.
oh, great. So you won't know this, but this National Geographic somehow got into my hands. It's from January 1973, and it's about centenarians. And
Okay.
that's what propelled me to wanting to know as much about people who lived to be 100 and propelled my interest in gerontology and geriatrics and why I do what I do. And so the author of this had his own zones 30, 40 years before the blue zones. And so I knew about that then. And then I did my own work in terms of writing and researching with my patients what was working for them. And then every day since I've written, I've found some supporting evidence about things that I consider important. And socialization sort of has been rising to the top of that, and it's been a very important part of my life in my re-inspirement that I want to make that a big part of what propels me to my longevity.
Mm. You know, when you say that, thank you for sharing, by the way. That's incredible. I love that. This National
It's
Geographic, it's amazing. But I really felt a warmth in my heart when you talked about this word, re-inspirement. Is that a word that you made up? Can we dive deeper into that?
sure. The re-inspirement comes from a podcast that I did early in my working with after writing my first book. Pardon me.
Hmm?
Red button. Sorry.
That's fine.
You could edit that out, I hope.
Yes. Yes, I can. Everything looks fine on my end.
Yeah.
Okay.
So re-inspirement came from one of the podcasters that I did.
Hmm.
And in that podcast, I learned the word re-inspirement, and it fit perfectly for what I do. I no longer go to my office with a staff. I go to my office here in my house, and I create, and I do it because it's good for my brain. And in writing my current book, I use some different methods. I use a little bit more artificial intelligence to come
Hmm.
up with some of the research I needed to do to make my book as good as I wanted it to be. So there were things in my book that were not in my day-to-day life, like words like decluttering, uh,
Mm.
words like universal design, how people can choose homes that are safest for them, because people want to age in place. But if you
Hmm.
age in place silently without making a commitment to update everything and have a shower that's safe and a bathtub that's safe and avoid steps, you've
Yeah.
only left it so that you're a prisoner in your own home. And so
Yeah. That's a good
I have
point. I'm an OT, so I know about that. And I know Melissa, your wife is too. It's an occupational therapist. Carry on.
and so that was really important that I explained to people that you can think you're going to stay in a home, but when that you fall and break your hip and your spouse has dementia, there's a chaos. There is something that, in my opinion, is preventable, and you've just laid a whole bunch of problems on somebody else, a doctor, a lawyer, family in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or across the country, and particularly if family can't even get to you quickly. So that it's important to upgrade things if you want to stay there, and that you have a knowledge that your medical community knows what your needs are, and you've updated things with your attorney or talked to things about with your accountant about finances. And the other thing that was I've learned along the way is this idea about sharing information with your family. And so a few years ago, my wife and I decided we would have family meetings. And so the best way to do that is with all of the children together at the same time, so that nobody can say, I didn't hear that. You didn't say that to me. They were all in the same room at the same time. And we can talk about our finances, our trust, our will, our last wishes. We use a thing called the five wishes that comes from hospice organization, and we
Mm.
have a living will so that everybody knows about it, and then have a conversation about driving and have a conversation about moving and aging in place and how you want to do that and how you're going to fix up your home so that you can do that. Or when I get to a certain point, we'll move to assisted living because being in a home is just too difficult for us. And I got to say, it's gotten a little bit easier with rideshare and being able to order online and have groceries delivered
Mhm.
or whatever needs it delivered. People can stay in their homes longer, but they still need to consider those other factors.
Yeah, yeah, good point. Oh, wow. This book is so timely and important, not only for people that might be doing it, but for family members that might be potential caregivers, correct?
Sure, really important. The whole process of heirlooms and decluttering is also an important issue. I have friends who don't declutter, and their houses are packed with items that nobody wants. I've spoken to our family and our children about what we have, and they don't want anything. They don't want dishes. They don't want old pictures. I have pictures of them when they're children. They throw them out. Give me my 5 baseball cards. Get rid of the rest. I don't need a baseball. I don't need a bat. What else don't they need? They don't need any. They don't want their report cards,
Oh,
and they
so
don't want
sweet.
anything.
You
And
save the report cards.
this is generational. This
Yeah.
maybe even applies to you because you're in a different generation than me in that regard.
Hmm.
And so it's like we've had to ourselves dispose of things, and I've researched that and figured out the best way that works for me, that I can take supplies of things to hospice retail store because I like them, and I've been in the store, so I know that the manager of the store, she's a former patient, and I can see how people are grateful for what they pick up in that store. And I put things in that store versus my kids taking it and putting it, or anybody else's kids putting it in a dumpster, and that nobody gets to share in what that is. So that was an important thing. I'll tell you a funny story. My best friend and I were talking about this yesterday, and he and his wife went home and talked about it. And she went up in her attic, which I've been in their house, and they have a lot of clutter, and I didn't even know they had an attic. And she told me something about uh, um, a device she made for her dog when her dog couldn't walk 20 years ago, and it's still in the attic and has never been disposed of. So people hold on to things for a really long time. And I included a portion in my book about moving and getting ready for moving day because that's a stressful time. And as a medical doctor, I recognize I had to deal with people who had that stress. And that stress is on top of another stress and a family member who can't make it into town or someone who's sick. So those factors were part of my existence, taking the best care of my patients as I could.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I'd love to hear about your career as an author and how you've evolved during your re-inspirement. I'm going to
Oh, I'm
use
so,
that word, by the way. I hope
oh,
everyone has a re-inspirement versus retirement.
addressing the re-inspirement, I know from my own experience and what I read, it's so important. And I'm quite a different person since I retired. I was pretty well, I've always been unassuming, but I was pretty shy and introverted in my work. And since I now know it's important to go out and do things and be with people, I am. In fact, just yesterday, I was walking home from my exercise and passed a house where there was a Chicago Bears flag, and a man was washing his car, and I walked past. I stopped and I walked back because I wanted to meet this man. I just wanted to spend that time and socialize with somebody. And it was an intentional effort because I had to think about it. And we had a wonderful conversation about his Bears winning a football game and that where he was from and what he did and how close he was to where my kids are living now. And we bonded and we had a little friendship going on. And that was really important. But getting back to the writing part, I started I always thought about writing. My high school graduation commencement speaker, his name was David Fisher, and by the time 10 years after he graduated, he had been a published author. And I said, in addition to being a doctor, I'm going to write a book. Over my career, I stored up all kinds of stories from my patients, and in 2017 started writing and published my first book in 2012. And you get kind of a bug about it. And it was like, I have more stories. I'm not leaving anything on the table. I got more accumulated. My patients inspired me, both the good and the bad of what they did, about how I could make my life better. And if I share those stories with other people, how it could make them better. Um, I write a couple blogs a month so that I think about something that goes on in the non-political world that has to do with health and vitality and longevity. And I share those ideas and come up with some way of educating individuals to make their health and their lives better.
That's wonderful. Would you share about the acronym GRACE?
Sure. So in that first publication that I wrote, I've got some good news and bad news, your old Tales of a Geriatrician. Now that's a long title, and that's the one that's over there on my bookshelf. I had all these stories, say 15 or 20, and I shuffled them like cards. Like, how do these stories come together? How do two or three stories mean the same thing? And when I was finally done, I realized that there were five things that people can do or did that made them live as long as they did and have happy, healthy, long lives. And so I wrote them down. I mushed, shuffled the letters and so forth and came up with the GRACE acronym. So G in GRACE stands for goals, and people who have goals or a purpose in life tend to be happier, less stress, and live longer. And the second is roots. Now, we can look at my GRACE acronym and say, well, these are reflections on what people did in their lives and then how you can incorporate it. So, knowing your roots, your DNA, your risk for certain diseases, such as diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, you can do some things about those. And by the way, genetics plays a role, but not as big a role as people think. It's much more about lifestyle.
Mm,
But knowing what your roots are, if your roots are those of diabetes and those are risk of heart disease and neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's disease, you can do things about that. A for attitude. And beyond attitude is gratitude and kindness. And I
mm,
know those are features that are near and dear to your heart, and that the
yes.
more kind we are, the more we're going to get out of life and we're going to do for other people, which is going to be helpful for our own health. And then companionship, that's something that's a recurring theme for me. But people who had companionship, people who are married lived longer than people who were single. Now, I'm reading about things that are changing in the married single environment currently, but for the most part, in my practice, people who had relationships and a support system and had a good one tended to be happier and live longer, even if it was, that cough, go to the doctor and get it checked out. But there's a lot more loving in that as well. And
Mm,
environment, E for environment, what we can do in our environment, both inside our body, like how we eat and how we exercise, and getting outside and being outside in nature and getting sunlight. People talk about walking barefoot in your garden because you get certain energy out of that. I take care of my plants in my yard, and that had as much to do with where we relocated as anything because my wife looking out for me wanted to make sure I could take my plants and have some things growing in my yard and things that are natural and that's maybe figuratively and literally speak to me. And one of the plants I have in my yard is an amaryllis.
mm.
And my mom gave me a single amaryllis about 10, 15 years ago. And I propagated, and now I have about 100 amaryllis bulbs around my property because I would go and separate
Wow.
them, put them in new pots, put them in new pots, and I'd give them away. So um, I have this reminder of my mother every time I see my amaryllis bloom in April. And I also have the feeling that I'm sustaining life in that regard. So that's the inside and the outside of environment, which is really important. And I can stack that up and say every day, have I done something to remember that I have a purpose, like sitting down at my desk and producing something and a goal. Um, have I looked back and on my roots and my DNA? Do I work with having the best attitude I can have and be kind to people, and so on and so forth with my GRACE acronym?
That's wonderful. And I love that. It's so easy to remember. And I also want to add what you were talking about before, community. Maybe companionship and community could go together because they're both C's.
Yes, it's all one big continuum. So you have a
Okay.
companionship at home, but in my book, The Power of Five, I talk about that C. I call it something different in that book because they're all S's. So it's socialization.
Hmm.
And socialization, I also call it sex. But
Hmm.
because in my generation, sex sells and I wanted to get attention and be glaring, but it's
Okay.
socialization. But with socialization, you have your central core, and that's your one partner. But then you have your 3 or 4 BFFs who are part of that concentric circle. And then the community gets factored into that. It's your community of the people around me in my neighborhood, but then there's a community at my synagogue or my wife's community of her people she plays mahjong with, or the guys I eat for lunch, eat out with on Thursdays, and so there's this growing supply of people that you surround yourself with, and that's what enhances health and well-being. It's a way of de-stressing. It's a way of helping people and being compassionate with people who need a helping hand, who reach out, and it goes vice versa.
Yes, absolutely. I love how you tied it all together. Well, would you share your latest article on health, wellness, and longevity? Do you have an
I've
article
written
or
some,
no? Oh,
I'll share something with you.
okay.
Um, I couldn't condense it to one article, so I wrote six blogs
Oh,
on
blogs.
how
Okay.
six.
Wonderful.
I wrote five, 600 word blogs on how technology is kidnapping our brains
Oh,
and
I love that.
what it's doing. So it starts with, there's neurochemicals that get involved when we get attached to this gadget here. So
Hmm.
this gadget, if it's too close, you're kind of always looking over at it. Am I getting
It's
something out of
true.
that? Did I get enough likes out there? Am I getting my dopamine buzz? But that
Mm.
dopamine buzz is the same kind of addictive buzz that people get from food,
Hmm.
from drugs, from alcohol, from cigarette smoking, so that there's an addictive quality to that. And I get really passionate or angry about the fact that there are people much smarter than me that know how to addict people. And you put one of these in my 3-year-old's hand, and he'll figure out how to use it. And the 5-year-old will figure out how to get to a YouTube channel that he wants to watch. So
Hmm.
that even at a young age, the colors of the cartoons and the graphics catch people's eyes. And so it really is addictive and it works in the brain. And there's so many other technological things that grab people in that whole environment. And I feel that I use the word kidnap, but it's really hijacked, that hijack our brain. And it's really sad for me. And so I did write about that. I wrote six blogs from June to December to express all that I felt about that.
Oh, wonderful. Where can people find that? And I can also put it in the show notes too if you don't want to say it now.
Well, in the show, it's everything's on my website.
Okay.
Um, Power of the number 5life.com. And good, I'm
Okay.
glad you're going to put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of things on there too about my latest book and some of the um, ancillary things that are available. My wife Melissa put together a week's worth of menus for people who move, and I have a checklist helping people when they move. So there's a whole bunch of other things, and I love the fact that I publish blogs, and I love the fact that you ask about them once a month. The earlier part of the month, they're a little bit more tame about if it's Heart Appreciation Month, Heart Month, or Diabetes Month. I'll talk about eating sweets and how people can overcome that, and I don't write as much about my frustration with the healthcare system, but I do indicate to people that they have to do their own heavy lifting. That the
Right.
healthcare system is a disease care system and not as much of a healthcare system. And so, if you want to remain healthy, you got to do your research, read my books, and take care of yourself. And I know the things that you do are really about from here up as well in terms of how do you take care of your mind. And there's a new word that I learned put in your vocabulary called allostatic load. And
Oh my gosh, amazing. Well, gosh, well,
and
it's been such a pleasure connecting with you again and hearing about your books. And everybody can look up that word, allostatic load,
yes,
and I'll
it
put your
it, it
website, yeah, and how to buy your
it's really a great word. People can really benefit learning how that allostatic load contributes to their stress.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that at the last moment. And
Yeah,
thank you for coming back on the Zen Success Show. I'm honored to have you, Dr. Bernstein. I hope you
it's been
have
my pleasure, Marissa.
Yes, wonderful. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks. You too.
That's it for today's episode of Zen Success. Head on over to iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to shows. Subscribe to the show and share with friends. Be sure to head on over to ZenSuccessShow.com to help you on your Zen success journey. And join us on the next episode. May you find your own Zen success in life.